Today we are doing our winter chapel, and my original was done on a pallet board. I'm going to slide this in here so you guys can see. But today we are going to do it on a canvas. So I am working on an 11 by 14 canvas. You can do a 16 by 20. You could get a taller, skinnier canvas if you wanted to, more the size of my pallet board. That one was 14 by 24. So you can do this chapel on a variety of backgrounds. Or you could even just do a piece of wood if you don't want to do canvas. So I'm going to show you the colors that we use really quick. We've got dark blue, robin's egg blue. These are both from Michael's Craft Smart brand. Then we've got white, burnt umber, black. These are from Walmart. And then I've just got a metallic pure gold. This is folk art. You can get this at Hobby Lobby or Walmart. Any metallic gold is fine. So those are the colors we're going to use today, and we are going to start with our background. I'm going to go and show you the brushes that I will most likely use today. We will change it up a little sometimes, but I'll let you know if I do. So just a 1-inch flat wash brush. I've already got some white in that. A palette knife. This is optional, so you can use a palette knife to scrape and add texture, or you can use brushes. We have an angled brush. This is like a 5/8 inch angled brush. Doesn't have to be that exact size. That's going to be for our trees. And then I've got like a number 2 round and a number 1 or number 0 round, just for some finer detailing. So we're going to start with our background, and I've got white loaded in my brush, and then I'm going to pick up a little bit of that dark blue. So you kind of get more of like that baby blue color with that. Then I'm going to pick up some of that robin's egg blue also. So you can kind of see we're just trying to get a variety of colors in our background. We don't want it to be solid, just one color. I like there to be a mixture of colors in my sky. Now this one, this is just a 1-inch brush. I'm just going back and forth, all different directions. So there's no certain way or style you have to do this. So kind of go side to side, angled, almost like you're making X's a little bit. And mine is not perfectly blended. If you want to blend, you can. I like to see the brush strokes in my background a little bit more than that. So that is your option with the brush. What I'm going to do is use my palette knife, and I'm just going to scrape some of, this is the robin's egg blue and white, and I'm just going to scrape these colors around. So you can already tell the different kind of texture or pattern it gives you using the palette knife. I just use the back side. This is just a cheap little, like, you can pick these up at any craft store, Walmart, in a little pack. And just adding a variety of these blues in the background here. If you like one color more than the other, you can make that more your dominant color. So I'm going to pick up some more of that robin's egg blue and white. And you can even mix these if you want to and create a totally different color of blue. So I just want you to realize there's no right or wrong here. You can make your background however you want. I like the look of the palette knife the best, so that's how I'm going to kind of proceed with mine. And you can do shorter scrapes or longer. You can pull these colors together. So just have fun playing with it. Let yourself get a little loose and creative. Don't overthink it. Just have fun with it. Now, if you're doing this at home and you've got a canvas, make sure you wrap your paint around your edges. I'm not going to worry about that right now, since I'm just showing you guys the front view, that I would normally go around my edges and wrap that paint around as well. And I'm going to come down to just about, I'll just give myself like a little idea of where my snow is going to start here. And if you go over that, it's fine because the white is just going to pull in some of our blue anyways. And most of this is going to be covered up by our chapel and our trees. And you can always go back and change this up. You could let it dry a little bit, and then if you want to go back and have some stronger colors, maybe a little more of the teal blue instead of the dark blue, you could go back and do that. And you can even do this after your chapel's on there. So that is our background. I'm going to add a little bit lighter up here, I think. And then I'm just going to set my palette knife down and grab some of the white. And it's okay for there to be a little bit of that blue in there because we want to be able to create the shadows in the snow. So if we just do plain white, you don't get that. So we want there to be a little bit of blue in there. I'm going to grab some more white paint here, and it doesn't matter which blue. And I'm just pulling this is my 1-inch brush, and I'm just kind of pulling it back and forth to add that in. We'll come back and add a little bit more detail to this. We'll get it a brighter white, but we don't have to worry about that right now because we want this to dry a little bit first, and then we'll be back to add some more of the pure kind of white snow on top of it. So I have mine kind of curve up a little bit of a hill there. Okay, so I'm going to start adding on the outline of our chapel here. And I'm not worried about if it's pulling through some of the wet paint because that's all going to get covered up anyways. And then I'm going to come in the middle between these two lines, not too much higher, and just kind of pull a line down this way, a line down that way. So kind of like we've got a little house. Come up a little bit more, and we're going to do the same thing, just a smaller version. That peak is still in the middle, and we're just going to come up a little bit higher and pull it down. And then our final skinnier one, and a little peak here. Leave enough room for our cross at the top. So don't worry about these all being too perfect. This is not something you're really going to notice at the end. I'm just filling in with our burnt umber and combination of black. So just a mixture of these two. And I'm going to go ahead and fill in the entire thing here. I may want to come back and let this dry just a little bit. So you know what we'll do? I'm going to let this dry just a little bit before I go ahead and get it all filled in, because if you're looking at the original, I'm going to show you guys this real quick again. Try to get it in here without knocking all my paint over here. So if you're looking at the original. See how it's really dark in the background? And then we're gonna drag white paint over top of it. So I want it nice and dark back there so we have that contrast. So that's what I'm shooting for. So what we'll do, we'll just jump down and add our path down here. So I know my door is going to be pretty much in the middle, so I'm just going to start small. This is just a combination of that black and brown mixture again. It's okay, this is still a little bit wet down here. That's actually to my favor because it'll pick up a little bit of that white. So I'm starting skinny, maybe about an inch or so, and then getting a little bit wider. And I'm just dragging the paintbrush back and forth. I'm not leaving the canvas, so I'm not picking up and touching down. I'm staying connected to the canvas the whole way. I'm going to pick up a little bit more white, just because mine's already dried down here towards the bottom. So again, staying connected, just dragging my paintbrush back and forth. Going off that edge just a little bit. Your sides can be messy. These don't need to be nice and clean. We'll come back and add some snow up against them in a second. So I'm just going to hit this with a blow dryer really quick. Get this a little bit drier so we can go ahead and... So if you don't want to mess with getting a blow dryer, you can just take a break from your painting, let that dry a little bit. Acrylic paint doesn't take a super long time to dry, so you really don't have to wait that long. So I want to come in with a nice dark brown again and get this filled in here. And again, I'm not worrying about, don't waste your time worrying about little details about the edges and all that kind of stuff. This is going to be covered up with trees. We're going to cover it up with white. We're going to cover it up with shadows. So don't spend too much time on those little details that at the end of the painting are not even going to matter. Just try to trust the process and keep moving. Let go of those perfectionist tendencies that we tend to have, and just kind of enjoy the process of creating. With acrylic paint, if you do something you're not happy with, all you have to do is let it dry and you can come back and fix it. So try not to get too caught up in all those little details in the process. And I'm not even worried about having these peaks perfect because we'll come back and accent that once we get our white in. All this is going to get covered up. I just want a nice dark background so we get that really pretty contrast when we add our white over top of it. So really the only thing you can see are these little lines coming off. The rest is just going to be nice and dark in the middle. So we're going to let that dry. I'm going to rinse my brush. I'm still sticking with my, actually, you know what, I'm going to switch. I'm going to switch over to my angled one. And we're going to grab some more white. You can see mine's kind of all mixed, but I'm getting to where I mostly have white. If you need to put more paint on your palette, you can. And I just want to start filling in some of this. I don't want to touch my brown if it's wet, so I'm just being real careful up against my edges there because I don't want to pull that brown into the snow. But I'm leaving this thick. So I'm getting a decent amount of paint on there, okay? And then I'm not overly blending because I want it to be thicker because of it being snow. It'll leave us a little bit of texture. Maybe pull that ground up just a little bit there. And then I'm going to grab a little of like my robin's egg blue, maybe add some streaks of that in a couple areas, just to add some interest. We don't want it to be too plain. Maybe the same thing with the white and a little bit of that dark blue. See how it makes that nice pretty pale blue color there. So we don't want to go too overboard with it, but just a little bit here and there, just like that. If you want to come up against your edges of your path here, maybe overlap that snow, give it a little bit of a build up around the path edges. So I'm not really, you guys see how I've got plenty of paint in my brush, but I'm not really overly blending it. I'm not going back and forth. I'm just kind of laying it down and adding some bigger sections of white in there so that it stands out a little bit more. All right, I'm gonna see if you have too thick of paint on here. I'm just gonna I rinsed my brush. And I'm just going to blend that in just a little bit so it's not super thick. And then I'm going to shoot it with the blow dryer again, so we can get that dry and I can show you how we're going to add the white over top of it. So I've smoothed that out a little just to make the drying process quicker. It's okay if it's a little bit damp. We just don't want it super wet, because then when you drag the white over top of it, it's just going to blend it together and make like a pale brown khaki color. And that is not what we're going for. We want a white chapel. All right, so I'm using that 1-inch brush again, and I'm drying it really good. So I'm just squeezing it in between my paper towels and drying it. This is the best way to do it. If you just wipe your brush on your paper towels, it's not going to get all the water out of there. So make sure you're drying it in between your paper towels. So I'm going to get a decent amount of white paint. Let me see how much I have on there. Now I'm just going to lightly drag this on my edges. I'm going to be a little careful here. This doesn't have to be perfect. Again, if you need to come back with a smaller brush for that top section, you can. And I'm not putting a lot of pressure down, so I am just lightly dragging. And this is kind of what we call a dry brush technique. And I don't want it to be all the same everywhere. Some areas are going to have maybe a little bit more brown showing through. Some are going to be more white, or you can do it to your preference. Maybe you want it to be really solid, or maybe you want it to be more rustic and have more of that dark brown showing through. Everyone's is going to be different, so don't worry about it being identical to my finished piece. I want it to look like your own. So just like that. It looks kind of messy right now. That's okay. So we're going to come back with our round, same one we used earlier. So this is just my number 2 round, and I want to pull the peaks back out. So I'm going to start at the top. Your background should be dry. If you need to rest your hand to pull those back down, you can do that. And we're going to be adding snow to the top of these, so again, I'm not worried too much about perfection here, because we're still going to be adding more details to it. And we've still got to add the windows in. So lots of steps to go. Just try to stay in the middle. So the harder you push down with your brush, the thicker your line's going to be. So I'm just kind of gently dragging along the edge there. We'll go back and give a little bit more edging to our side. Not a lot. I don't want this to be super solid outline here, but just a light little edging there. Maybe pull this out just a little bit more on that side. Come back in if you need to with your small brush. If you have some of those little smaller areas you need to tweak, you can come back in and do that. Okay. All right, so I'm going to hold this up for myself to make sure I have it straight. Just bear with me just a second. I just want to make sure I have my line straight. Might have to pull this down. A little bit more here. So what I'm doing, I needed that peak to come down just a little bit more here. But I'm not going to worry about how thick that is. I'm just going to cover that up with snow. But that's just allowing me to straighten that out a little bit. So I'm going to start adding in my doors and my windows up here. I just have a little rectangle. And again, this is just a combination of like the black-brown mixture. It doesn't really matter what is more dominant. That's kind of up to you. So that's a little rectangle. In this middle one, we'll do a little circle. And I'm not trying to be perfect with these either. I like the rustic look of these chapel paintings where they're not all identical and perfect. Then here I want to have kind of a little arched window, so kind of like a triangle top. And then a square bottom, or rectangle, triangle, whatever you want to call it. And then just kind of fill that in. And then my door, I'm going to kind of have a curved, more of an arch, and then down. And again, this is just my style. You can change your door and make it a different shape if you want to. And then I've got some little rectangle windows off to the side. And again, I'm not worried about these being perfect rectangles. Your paintings will have more character if things are not perfect. All right, so that's that. So now that I've got all of that filled in, we can let that dry before we go back and add our colors, and I can start showing you guys how we're going to do these trees. So we're going to get some of our dark blue to start with. And I know I want this tree to stop right about here as far as like height. Maybe just a little bit taller than that top level. And I'm going to have it come down past my chapel. I'm going to add a little bit of black to my blue just to make it darker. So that is going to give me a darker, almost like a navy color background. And then I have 3 trees over here, and they're a little bit shorter. But I give myself these vertical lines for each tree. This thickness doesn't matter. This is all going to be covered up. This is more of just for a reference for you. So I know I'm going to have 3 trees on this side and 1 on this side. So I'm going to use my small brush to get started at the top. And we're just going to do this. Start at your point and just kind of flip your brush out. Just like that. And you're just going to keep going all the way down. So you can stay with this brush. So I'm going to do all my peaks like this because it's easier to control with this smaller brush like this. Add a little bit more black to that. So the darker we have this background of our trees, the more contrast we're going to have when we come back and add our snow in. And they do not all need to be identical. So I'm stopping about halfway down on all of them, and then I'm going to grab my angled brush, so this guy, and just going to continue using that pointed edge out so it starts filling it in a little bit faster for you. So you don't even have to have it all completely solid. You can let a little bit of the sky show through if you want. I am overlapping my church. And you do want to go off the side of your canvas just so it doesn't look like you have like a little border there. So that tree is kind of going off our page there. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. We'll just start on this side. Since I'm right-handed, we'll move right to left. So see, I'm just doing this quick back and forth motion. So this time I have the angle in this side and I'm just pulling out. And when I am pulling this way, I'm kind of lifting up when I'm doing that, and that's giving it that taper. And these are going to overlap. Don't worry about whether you can tell where one starts and stops. They're all going to overlap each other. And I'll show you the original again in just a second so you can kind of see that reference. And I actually want this tree to be in the background, so I'll probably come back and pull my outline from my chapel back over that to cover that up, because these trees are going to be kind of further back behind the church. So you can see they're all kind of blended together right now. That's okay. They don't need to be separated, because if you're looking at the original here, see how all those trees are overlapping? But when we add the white on top of them, we'll get a little bit more definition there. Okay, so I'm rinsing all the blue out of that, and I want that to dry a little before we go back to it. I'm going to go ahead and grab my white and pull this back over the top so that those trees go behind my building. Add a little bit of black on that edge. And this will go on top as well. So judging on how thick your paint is, you'll have to kind of decide what you want to do next. Again, you can pull out the blow dryer. That's what I'm going to do for the sake of the video. Take much, just that little quick blast of air is enough to dry it. So I've rinsed all that dark color out of my angled brush. I'm coming back with just white and nice and thick. You guys see how much paint I have in there. So now I'm doing the point in. And just kind of dragging and pulling it out. So you can have your brush strokes overlap. If you want to come back with a little of, you know, maybe a little bit of your other lighter blue and mix that in, you can. That makes it pretty as well. So just kind of pulling out on the edges here. Where they meet in the middle, you can kind of overlap a little bit, and we're just curving different directions. So going out this way, then going out this way. And you guys can practice this on like a mixed media pad if you want to do that before you go straight to your painting to get a little bit more used to it. And then we'll do the same thing over here. And I had mine pretty heavily snowed in my original, so I didn't leave a ton of that background color showing through. So I'm starting with, again, my far left, and then as I go across, I'll just kind of overlap the previous one. And it gives them a little bit of definition. You're not asking for a ton here. But you see how I'm kind of starting my brush strokes from that middle point where we originally had our line drawn. And I'm going to be careful here. I'll have to pull that line back over because, again, I want this to go behind. So if you pull some of your color over top of your chapel, just let that dry, and then you can go back and add in more of the lines on the chapel to go back and fill that in. So we've got our trees down there. I'm going to take a little bit of my blue, that darker blue, and kind of come underneath those trees a little just to create a little bit more shadow. We've still got a fence to add over top of that. Same thing here, maybe a little bit in front of the chapel and underneath this one. And if you get too much more shadow than you're comfortable with, you can always come back and add some white over top of it. I would definitely step away from your painting before you decide that for sure. So set it up, kind of look at it, take a step back and decide what you think. Because shadows are a tricky thing. When you do them and you're up close to your painting, it seems like really strong and almost too much. But when you have them hanging on the wall, it's exactly what it needs to be. Pull this over just a little bit more, I think. I want this tree to be a little bit bigger than my other one. Alright, so I'm going to go in with my skinnier round brush now. This is a 1 or a 0. And we will start adding in some of the inner colors of our stained glass. So I'm still using the 2 blues that we had in our original. Got to grab my gold paint here. And you don't need a ton, so just like a little drop of gold on there. So for my stained glass, I like to start with one color and kind of add a little bit in. This is really quick and really random. The more random you can be with it and not overthink it, the better it's going to look. So I get plenty of paint in my brush, and then I'm just lightly kind of dabbing around. I don't want it to all necessarily stay connected. It's okay for it to mix with some of the colors underneath. Just here and there to have that color in there. So that's with my baby blue. Then I'm gonna jump over to my dark blue. So see how I'm just kind of taking turns with the colors. Try not to overthink it. Do it fast first, and then if you need to come back and tweak something, you can. But this is going to give you a better look if you don't think about it too much. So we've got our blues mixed in there, and then here's what really makes it pop. I'm just wiping my brush off is the gold. And I'm just not putting down a ton of pressure, just dabbing down here and there. Hardly even brush strokes, kind of just putting the paint down and then leaving it. So you guys see I'm not pushing down hardly at all. I'm just kind of dragging that paint around. But I love the way the gold pops on here. And then you've got your stained glass. And then I use the gold in my doors. And we'll probably come back and add a little bit of darkness in here too with some black and burnt umber. So lots of gold on my doorway. And then we'll jump back over. Mostly black. Maybe add a more definite line down the middle to break those doors up. And keep in mind this is abstract, so we're not getting too detail oriented here. You can add a doorknob if you want to. I did not add any handles. Now I'm going to go back with a little bit more of my gold again. So you just play with it until you get it the way you want. These are more vertical brush strokes than just the crazy messy ones that we had there. I'm going to straighten this. This has got to curve out just a little bit more. So just kind of play with it until you get it the way that you want. Maybe add a little bit of black down here at the bottom, at the entryway there. Now we want to add our cross on at the top. I'm using my skinny brush. Not putting down a ton of pressure there. So the next thing we are going to do is add in our fence, and then just a couple little last touches. We need to add the snow to our chapel, add some of the snowflakes in. So I'm going to stay with my small brush here. Black-brown mixture again, mostly black. And I'm going to start adding in my fence. So these are just, it's very simple. You're just going to come and make these little posts, maybe about an inch and a half apart. And again, I'm not trying to make these perfect. They're just little rectangles, and they're kind of going at an angle down the side here. I have one more right on that edge. So we've got our posts first, and then we'll come back in, and I'm just going to drag my brush along to connect these, and we're going to have two horizontal lines that go across for our fence. Leaving a little bit of space at the bottom. We don't want it to come all the way down. Just like that. I'm going to come in right on, very lightly, I've just got this dark color in here, right underneath my snow. I'm just going to do a couple very little light brush strokes of some of that darker color right against that edge. See how that creates a little bit of a shadow there? Do the same thing on this side. So I'm just kind of coming underneath where I had some of this snow overlap my path, just to create a little bit more depth with that. If you wanted to, you could add a couple little streaks in of that color. Maybe pull it out just a little bit. I don't have very much paint in there at all, so I'm just kind of lightly dragging that across. So now we want to come back with our snow. So for your snow in the sky, you're going to flip your brush around, and you're just going to add these little dots just like this. My canvas is moving on me. You can add as many as you want. Again, don't overthink this. Just wherever your hand lands, that's where your snow is going to be. So that's one way to do snow. Another way is I'm going to water down my white, so I've got it nice and watery, and I'm just going to tap, and it creates these tiny little snowdrops everywhere. So that's a little bit more sporadic and crazy. If you can handle that, and I'm just going to load up. So for this snow, we want a little on our cross up here. All I'm doing for the snow is I've got it loaded up in my small round, and I'm just going to drag it along the peaks of each little roof. Okay, this is supposed to be kind of wobbly and uneven. Not supposed to be a perfect line because that wouldn't look like snow. This is great, like if you messed up, if you did what I did and made it a little thicker over here, you can come back, make the snow a little bit thicker in that section. So I'm just kind of dragging along there. And we want to do the same thing with our fence posts. Be careful if you're going right where your wet black-brown color is. You don't want to mix that into your snow. But I'm going on the top of each one of those. And then I'm going to very carefully go on the top of my horizontal brush strokes along the fence. Notice how I'm just staying in between the gaps so that those vertical posts stay separated. So just like that. Now I'm going to come in and add Just some light streaks of snow across my path. Just as many as you want there. Maybe come in and add some buildup of some snow around my posts down here. So just little things like that add more depth because it pulls that blue in the background, makes that look like it's back further. It pulls our snow, kind of piles it up in the front here. So you can just kind of play until you get it the way that you want. If you want any, just really bright little sections of white in your tree, you can come back and add some of those in. So this is just kind of where you're eyeballing and figuring out where you want to add subtle little details into our happy little trees. I'm going to grab a little bit of my light blue, kind of pull this in here and there throughout my trees just to add a little more definition and coloring there. You can leave them just plain white if you want. So there is no right or wrong. Just make sure if you do anything, if it overlaps something that should be in front, you go back and correct that. Pull your posts back in front again, or pull your chapel back in front again. So that is about it, my friends. We'll add a little dot of white up here. And we are done. So if you are joining for the first time and you are new to the Social Easel Online Paint Studio, I hope you enjoyed your free lesson today. And this is just kind of a glimpse of how it works inside of our group. We do 3 paintings per month, and then we do a technique troubleshooting week at the end of the month, where if you had any problems with any specific areas in the paintings, either from that month or prior months, you can ask me those questions and I will go over in detail and show you in my media pad very detailed instructions for whatever it is that you may be struggling with. So I'm super excited. We have an awesome group of ladies in there and gentlemen, and we will be accepting new members beginning in March. So stay tuned for March. Make sure you are on our wait list, and you will be the first ones notified when we open the doors again to our private membership group. So I hope you guys enjoyed it and have fun painting.